You reach for a stone tool someone left beside the fire. Your left hand closes around it first, instinctively the way it always does, but the tool doesn't fit. Its edge was shaped for a right hand because everything here was shaped for a right hand. You're surrounded by people who grip, throw, and carve the opposite way you do. 9 out of 10 of them, give or take, across nearly every group that has ever existed. Evolution has been trying to kill left-handedness for hundreds of thousands of years, hot and failing. So, why does your left hand still lead? Handedness is old, far older than language, farming, or civilization. Fossilized teeth from 500,000 years ago show scratch marks angled for right-handed grip. Our ancestors held meat in their teeth and cut it with a stone tool. The direction of the scratches tells us which hand held the blade. Even then, roughly 90% were right-handed. That ratio has barely budged in 500,000 years. Think about that for a moment. Evolution usually eliminates traits that don't serve a clear purpose. It's ruthlessly efficient that way. If being left-handed were purely a disadvantage, it would have vanished ages ago. But it didn't just survive. It locked in at a strangely stable frequency. Not 50-50, not 0, but exactly around 1 in 10. That precision hints at something deeper than randomness. Today, you notice this the moment you pick up a pair of scissors, or try to write in a spiral-bound notebook without smearing everything. The modern world is a right-handed world, and it barely pretends otherwise. Yet, lefties keep showing up generation after generation, stubbornly and reliably. Which raises the obvious question, what's keeping them here? And the answer turns out to be a kind of evolutionary arms race. Not between species, but inside our own, and it has everything to do with fighting. Your brain isn't symmetrical. The left hemisphere typically controls the right side of the body and vice versa. In most people, the left hemisphere dominates for motor control and fine tasks. That's why most people are right-handed. The dominant hemisphere drives the opposite hand. In left-handers, this wiring runs differently. Sometimes the right hemisphere takes the lead. Sometimes both hemispheres share control more equally. This isn't a flaw, it's a different architecture entirely. And it's partly genetic. Not one gene, dozens, maybe hundreds, each nudging the odds by a tiny fraction. If both your parents are left-handed, you have about a 26% chance of being left-handed too. If both are right-handed, your odds drop to about 9%. So genetics loads the dice, but it doesn't guarantee the outcome. Prenatal environment, hormone exposure, and even random developmental noise play roles too. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. Researchers studying combat sports noticed something they couldn't ignore. How left-handed fighters win more often than their numbers would predict. In boxing, fencing, tennis, MMA, any sport involving direct physical confrontation, left-handers are dramatically overrepresented among champions. The reason is disarmingly simple: surprise. Right-handed fighters spend their lives training against other right-handers. They develop reflexes tuned to attacks from one direction. A southpaw reverses everything, and those trained reflexes suddenly misfire. It's not that lefties are stronger or faster, they're just rarer. And rarity itself becomes a weapon. This is called negative frequency dependent selection. A trait becomes more advantageous the rarer it is in the population. If left-handers became common, their advantage would evaporate, everyone would learn to fight them, and the surprise factor would die. But if they became too rare, their combat edge would grow enormous, pulling them back up. So, evolution found a stable equilibrium, roughly 10% worldwide for millennia. Not too many, not too few, but just enough to stay dangerous. Now here's the modern twist. You probably don't settle disputes with hand-to-hand combat anymore. The survival advantage that kept left-handedness alive is, for most of us, completely irrelevant. Nobody's winning a promotion because their punches come from an unexpected angle, and yet the ratio holds. About 10% of every population on Earth is left-handed right now, today, across cultures that celebrated it and across cultures that tried to beat it out of children. For centuries, left-handedness was treated as something shameful. The Latin word for left is sinister. That's not a coincidence. In many languages, left translates to words meaning awkward, clumsy, or evil. Schools force children to write with their right hands well into the 20th century. Cultural pressure, punishment, stigma, none of it worked. You can force someone to write with their right hand, but you can't rewire their brain. The underlying neural architecture stays left dominant no matter what the teacher says. Meanwhile, the modern world keeps building for the majority. Power tools spin the wrong way for lefties, and some designs become genuinely dangerous. Left-handers have slightly higher rates of workplace accidents involving machinery, not because they're clumsier, but because the equipment was never designed for their bodies. There's a quiet, constant tax on being wired differently in a standardized world. And still, the 10% holds firm because evolution doesn't respond to scissors and notebooks, it responds to survival and reproduction over thousands of generations, and something in that 10% keeps earning its place. Here's what most people miss about this story. Left-handedness isn't a glitch that slipped through the cracks of natural selection. It's a permanent minority strategy that evolution actively maintains. The same pattern shows up in other species, by the way. In some species of fish preferentially attack from one side. The rarer side has a higher hit rate because prey aren't prepared for it. Same principle, different body, identical logic. Nature figured out this trick long before we had a name for it. The real insight isn't about hands at all. It's about the power of being uncommon in a world that rewards conformity. Evolution doesn't just select for the best trait, it selects for the right balance of traits. A population of all right-handers would be vulnerable in a specific exploitable way. That 10% of lefties is like a built-in disruption, a hedge against predictability, and this reveals something almost philosophical about how evolution thinks. It doesn't optimize for perfection, it optimizes for resilience, and resilience requires variation, even when that variation is inconvenient for the individual. So if you're left-handed, your body is carrying a strategy older than spoken language, older than agriculture, older than art, older than fire used for cooking. You exist not despite being different, but because being different is the whole point. And if you're right-handed, don't get too comfortable. Your majority only works because the minority keeps you honest. Evolution doesn't pick winners, it picks ratios, and it has held this one steady with the patience of something that thinks in millennia. Your left hand, or the left hand beside you, kind of was never a mistake. It was the plan.